I can remember so well. Our family just moved into a new apartment, and it was on a Sunday evening. Well, before this, Erna and Ched put together the show. I sat in on meetings during the process of this, but I don't claim ownership. But I certainly was happy that I contributed things that were important to the show, and the show went on the air. And Ted put on two shows at the same time. One was Morning Star. They both went on NBC, and NBC didn't have much of a daytime. These could very well have been the first two daytime shows in NBC, and after the first 13 weeks, Morning Star was dropped. After the 26th week, they were told that Days was going to be dropped. It just wasn't drawing numbers. Well, it was at that time that the man who had tried very hard to have me fired off that show called me one night. We were in this new apartment, and we were doing some work on it and stuff, and it was Teddy. And again, I don't want anyone to get the misconception that this was anything but a terrific man who as creative as any director can be, and he was a good story man. And for some reason, he wanted me out of there, and I think he was just jealous of my relationship with Erna, which is a very human thing. I just want to make sure that that's all put in perspective, because I wouldn't want there to be any other consideration given to my references. But in any event, he called and says, "Bill, how are you?" I said, "Fine, Ted. How are you?" And he said, "Fine." And he said, "Do you have a few minutes to talk?" And I said, "Sure." And he's vamping, and I'm wondering where he's going. And he said, "Bill, I would like you to take over Days of Our Lives for me." Pause. "You want me to take over the show?" He says, "Yes." And he said, "The show is not doing too well. It needs young blood. And would you do it?" Well, this was a moment of truth. I mean, this was, did I want to take that responsibility? Was I ready for that responsibility? I said, "Ted, let me think about it tonight, and I'll get back to you tomorrow." So we hung up, and I told Lee, and it was nervous time. It is a moment of truth. I mean, you've got it, but do you have it? This is how you prove it. But you got something pretty good going for you now. Now, you do know that Erna owned part of the show as well. So I called Erna and told her that Ted had called, and she said, "I knew he was going to." And she said, "But I expect that you'll continue working with Guiding a Light," and which threw me a little bit. And so, in any event, we ended the phone call. And the more I thought about it, the next morning I told Ted that I would do it. But I also knew something else, that if I was going to take this show, and it needed work, it needed revamping, if I were going to do this, then I don't have time for Guiding Light. This is a job two jobs in itself. And so I told Teddy I would do it, and I told him what I was going to tell Erna. And so, but Teddy was very grateful, and I learned, it was only some weeks later, that Ted was he was dying. I didn't know that. No one had told me. No one had knew except his family. And his wife later told me, though, Betty, that when he hung up, he was so glad, and I mean he was moved to tears, and he says, because the show was their livelihood, the families, and he said that Bill's going to do it, and we have the Cordays have a show.